let's get right into this explainer of Daniel H. Pink's book, Drive. You know the feeling. You sleep for 8 solid hours, you drink your coffee, you sit down at your desk, and yet this profound, heavy exhaustion sets in the exact second you look at your screen. It's a fatigue that just doesn't make logical sense, right? Because on paper, you used to actually love doing this work. Today, we're diagnosing this very specific, quiet pathogen. Why do highly capable people often find their work tasting chemically dead? Daniel H. Pink isn't attacking your ambition in this book. He's tracing a biological fault in our nervous system, diagnosing why our internal hunger for complex work sometimes just completely vanishes, leaving us feeling hollow despite all our outward success.
Notice the visceral truth here. You sit down to work and your body reacts like the task has been chemically coded. Your chest tightens before you even start. The laptop opens and your nervous system just recoils. And here's the absolute crucial thing. I wish this weren't true, but look at where it leads. It recoils not because you're lazy or ungrateful, but because your organism is instinctively reacting to the heavy, artificial coding around the work. The looming deadlines, the arbitrary scores, the relentless pressure to prove your worth to the whole world. It's the invisible residue of external expectations, and your system has literally learned to reject that residue before you type a single word.
Which brings us to this really profound realization. Drive is about what happens when trying becomes suspicious. Your system gets wary of its own output, constantly wondering if the effort is genuine or if it's being artificially coerced. Look, this book is not about trying harder or gritting your teeth through the friction. It's a clinical look at what happens when your motivational receptors adapt to constant pressure and praise. See, when we treat every task as a demand for compliance, our natural biological hunger for work doesn't just disappear. It gets trained to wait for a chemical hit. We stop initiating movement ourselves, and instead we just sit dormant until an outside force triggers us.
The toxin of reward. When reward becomes the primary signal, your mind stops tasting the work and starts tasting permission. I really want you to internalize this logic because I know it often feels like a personal failure of willpower, but you aren't broken. Your organism has simply learned to metabolize external pressure instead of internal desire. You still produce, right? You still look incredibly responsible to everyone around you, but you're quietly starving the very work you actually care about because the reward became so much louder than the work itself. Just think about that for a second. You aren't lacking discipline. As Drive reveals, your mental receptors are simply flooded by a toxic environment.
This biological response is exactly what Daniel H. Pink categorizes in this book as type I behavior. The I stands for internal. It's an internal metabolic system that acts because the work is recognized as inherently worth doing, not merely because a shiny reward has been displayed in front of you. You see, motivation has to be metabolized from the inside out for it to survive. It grows only when the environment allows your mind to truly recognize the work as deep nourishment, rather than just treating it as a sterile demand that happens to have a piece of candy attached to the end of it.
So let's run a little thought experiment to see just how fragile this internal immune system really is. What if every deep task came with a cash meter running in the corner of your vision? Just imagine if every quiet choice, every hard conversation with a colleague, every single moment of deep, uninterrupted focus literally earned you points. Well, at first, your output would absolutely skyrocket. The adrenaline would carry you. But soon, your taste would completely collapse. Why? Because you'd stop asking what's actually true or what deeply matters, and you'd only ask what scores. You would exchange your inner organic signal for outer proof, and the entire activity completely changes flavor.
Now, you might look at this and feel trapped in a dilemma. On one end of the spectrum, you tighten incentives to force output. The body moves, the calendar looks beautifully clean, the metrics are met, but the work goes entirely pale and lifeless. On the other end, you loosen control and risk drift. You risk utter silence. You risk seeing if your internal desire is even still alive without the threat of a deadline looming over you. But here's the thing. Both are symptoms of the exact same misunderstanding. They both mistakenly treat motivation as an inert chemical to just inject, rather than a living biological response that requires careful cultivation and the precise environmental conditions to thrive.
Because of this misunderstanding, we completely fail to realize that a reward is not neutral when the task needs judgment. Rewards are powerful, potent chemicals. They absolutely help us push through simple, repetitive, mechanical tasks where the path is obvious. But when the work requires creative judgment, emotional intelligence, and genuine care, the reward acts as a localized anesthetic. It narrows your attention and completely numbs your receptors. The carrot is not harmless when the task needs taste. It overrides your subtle instincts and replaces them with a frantic, desperate tunnel vision.
Think of your inner drive like a single healthy seed coated in a glass petri dish under a thick layer of heavy syrup. That seed isn't lazy. It isn't defective. It's simply suffocated by way too much external sweetness. Too much reward, too much pressure to perform, eventually becomes a profound numbness. If we want that seed to actually germinate and grow, we don't stand over it and yell at it to try harder. I mean, that would be absurd, right? Instead, we need to return it to clean water. We need to clear out the dense sugary residue in the dish so the organism can finally breathe again.
So how exactly do we clear the dish? Daniel H. Pink identifies 3 biological conditions necessary for signal recovery: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And look, these aren't just trendy corporate slogans to slap on a break room poster. They're vital metabolic conditions. Autonomy clears the dish and lets the mind taste ownership again, like finally getting to choose the sequence of a project rather than reading off a mandated script. Mastery gives the seed necessary feedback, making the effort appetizing, like feeling the muscle of your mind actually grow when you untangle a complex problem. And purpose, well, purpose warms the light. It connects the raw energy of your daily grind to a larger, living human ecosystem, providing the metabolic heat required for long-term survival.
This completely reframes how we view purpose. Purpose works like taste, recovering after a long, exhausting fever. If you've been feeding exclusively on the junk food of pressure, fear, and external approval for years, your appetite needs serious time to trust real, subtle flavors again. When you first step back from the heavy syrup of external rewards, purpose might actually feel false, dry, or even empty. But you recover it not by yelling the word meaning at yourself in the mirror, but by patiently reducing the toxic noise around the signal, until the organism slowly remembers how to taste entirely on its own.
This presents a second deeply uncomfortable choice between controlled success and exposed desire. You can choose to stay in controlled success, where you know the exact safe dose of praise and stress needed to merely survive the week. Or you can step into autonomous work and face your own exposed, recovering desire, without the safety net of a mandated quota. You might discover the old reward system was entirely carrying you, and you have to rebuild your immune system from scratch. But remember this: avoiding this reality means you're self-sabotaging with clean hands, winning everyone's approval while silently losing your own appetite.
So I want you to ask yourself this deeply. What kind of work needs you alive? Not merely awake, not merely functioning at a desk, but biologically, vibrantly alive. Drive forces us to ask what kind of craft, what kind of empathetic leadership, what kind of innovation actually dies under constant scoring. If the work needs your unique judgment, your refined taste, and your genuine care, then the constant, suffocating pressure of external metrics isn't just annoying, it's slowly killing the very organ within you that senses value and beauty in the process.
And this brings us to one of the most confronting ideas in this entire book. You cannot bribe yourself into aliveness. That sick, twisted feeling of forcing yourself to do meaningful work through dead, artificial incentives, that deep self-sabotage you constantly blame yourself for, it's just your body rightfully rejecting contamination. Your body is not rejecting the effort itself. It's rejecting the chemically noisy, polluted environment you've placed the effort within. This realization changes the diagnosis entirely. It completely removes the heavy shame of feeling unmotivated.
Imagine stepping out of a heavily polluted city and into a high-altitude forest. At first, the clean air actually burns your lungs. You might even cough, but slowly, your respiratory system remembers how to function without filtering out smog. The ultimate refinement in our work life is returning to these cleaner conditions. You have to recognize that care is a biological part of the movement. You don't move first and care later. Use chemical rewards only where the work is simple, repetitive, and mechanical, and actively distrust rewards where the work requires life. Daniel H. Pink demonstrates here that discipline shouldn't be about starving yourself. It should be about making the work internally legible again to the part of you that still recognizes true nourishment.
If the logic of this book shifted your internal environment and helped you in seeing clearly, there is more to explore. We constantly return to books like Drive because they remove false toxic pathogens and point us back to our natural, cleaner conditions. Visit upgowise.com when you want the next assumption dismantled.
Before you set a reward, if the work needs judgment, that is your signal to add choice first.